So how should the West respond? Our Flashbrief analysts in Washington, Boston, and Doha say getting it right means focusing less on our offense and more on the defense of civilians. And how can we help African states shore up their own internal security for their own people? Here's the Flashbrief.
Al-Qaeda has always looked for what we call areas of weak central authority, or gray areas. It's why Afghanistan was so attractive. It's why war-torn Iraq was so attractive. These are organizations that look for places where the government cannot project power beyond the capital. That pretty much describes most of Africa, and it's why you're seeing Al-Qaeda active there today.
I even think the Europeans are somewhat overstating the threat here. The fact is that the now 6 different groups competing for power in Mali are primarily concerned with local conditions. They either want autonomy for the Tuaregs or they want to impose some kind of Islamic revolution on Mali. These are not groups that have the same sort of global agenda that, say, Osama bin Laden had, and we ought to bear that in mind. One way to give them a global agenda is to have the entire international community show up and start trying to take over the country.
The local population in Mali and actually everywhere in Africa is strongly rejecting any kind of jihadi groups, and that's for a simple reason. That's not obviously only because they are sympathetic to the West, but mainly because they are the first victims of these terrorist groups. And the West has to understand that and to secure the daily life of civilians above all.
Now, many of those civilians in Mali that she just mentioned, they're fleeing the country and fleeing in fear. In fact, the United Nations Refugee Agency reports more than 375,000 have been forced from their homes since the crisis began last January. The UN says 229,000 civilians are internally displaced and about 147,000 more are refugees in neighboring countries.